1945, and today the entire world, but especially Eastern Europe and Central Europe, lives in a position of extreme terror and tension. War might break out at any moment. But my friends, they have been saying this over and over and over again for the last 5 years that war will break out tomorrow, war will break out the next week, war will break out the next month, war will break out by Christmas, that Kolchak will invade the intermarium, that Reinhard Hydrich, whose Germany has finally recovered from the problems of the civil war, will attack Eastern Europe to subjugate it for their vision of Aryan glory. But this has never happened. And while there have been wars, quite significant ones, these have been of a more localized nature, except of course in the case of China, but we shall get to that later on. In general, the world has stayed at peace. The Second Great War has never transpired. But now, let us take a quick look at the world so that we will gauge where it stands today and where we want it to stand as revolutionaries. Yes, we are revolutionaries of the Bukharinist kind, the men and women who have fought for liberating the Spanish workers and will now fight for liberating the proletariat of the entire world. But no, we do not believe in going all in on day one. Just as you cannot teach a child to walk from the first day that he is born, it is the same about the economy. But thankfully, Chairman Bukharin, whose USSR has sadly died out, has shown us the way forward. One can still reach socialism by steps. First, we shall make the economy ready, developed enough in capitalism. Not the capitalism of the bourgeois or the feudalists, but the capitalism of the people, where the state shall work to improve infrastructure and build the economy through a combination of state-owned enterprises, cooperatives, and private businesses to foster economic growth and international cooperation with non-socialist states. That is the way forward. But now let us examine the entire countries and continents, beginning with our neighbors in Portugal. Portugal is ruled by the brutal dictatorship of Antonio de Oliveira Salazar. But unlike the idealists of Central Europe or the democrats or even the oriental despotism of Alexander Kolchak, Antonio de Oliveira Salazar is not really an ideologue. No, he wants a society without ideology, an organic state of the kind that had existed before 1789. There are some rumors that he plans to crown the King of Braganza once more as kings of Portugal, but he declined those offers, believing them to have gone too liberal. Then, of course, speaking of liberalism, we have our neighbors in the French Republic. They are extremely liberal. In fact, Gaston Doumergue is one of the most liberal leaders to have ever existed. For he has banned homosexuality being a crime, which means that now you can be gay, homosexual, you can be literally anything you want inside the French Republic. All sorts of religions and immigration is welcome. Then we have the United Kingdom, which has gone in the opposite route, a democratic yet extremely conservative turn under Stanley Baldwin and his Tory party. But now we come to the big boogeyman of Central Europe, the Deutsches Reich under Reinhard Hydrich. Hydrich is too young to be the Führer of the Reich. He was not supposed to be so. During the German Civil War, when Adolf Hitler reunified Germany, every hope was there that Hitler would reunify Germany and then launch a brutal war of extermination against Eastern and Central Europe. But that never transpired because Hitler died on the front lines. After Hitler, Heinrich Himmler came to power for about 6 months. But in extremely dubious circumstances, Heinrich Himmler also perished, and power soon came to Reinhard Heydrich. Heydrich calls himself a Himmlerite and a Hitlerite, so his official ideology is Himmlerite Hitlerism. It is its bureaucratic and securitarian perfection, where the state transforms into an all-seeing entity, governed by its own internal logic of control. Through intelligence agencies, secret police, and the iron hand of order, the nation is to be cleansed of all weakness. We have been hearing some really horrifying reports from the Deutsches Reich of minorities and especially Jews being sent to locations far into the countrysides and then never appearing again. We do not know for sure what is exactly happening in the Deutsches Reich, for Hydrich has made the economy a very closed one. But whatever we hear these days is horrifying. Thankfully, at least some horrifying acts have been clamped down after Hydrich came to power. For in the 6 months when Himmler was Führer, we heard reports that there were things like mob lynching of Christian churches, of priests, of people being sent to swamps for eldritch occultist ceremonies and never reappearing again. Now, Hydrich has clamped down on the esotericism to build a perfect state of securitarianism where every citizen is watched all the time. Recently, they've also invested money into something which they call surveillance cameras. It is unknown how these cameras will work out, but recently they have been appearing on every single street in Germany, taking photographs every hour. And they claim that in the future, these photos might be taken every moment. And thus we end the chronicle of the most racist nation on earth. But this doesn't mean that its influence has waned. You see, Eastern and Central Europe is today in a state of tension, as I said before, although not war yet. It is basically divided into three parts. The first is the German sphere of influence under Reinhard Heydrich. Part of the German sphere of influence is Germany. But sometimes even the Czechoslovak Republic, despite being liberal, is touted as being a part of the German sphere of influence, mainly to oppose the intermarium. But what is the intermarium? The intermarium is a pact which is designed to restrict Russia to the world heartland, to not let Russia engorge the rimland. The rimland is a territory on the periphery of the internal heartland of Eurasia, and the intermarium's only goal is to stop both German and Russian aggressive expansion. Many call the intermarium a glorified Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth 2.0, and they are not far from the truth. But there is one key difference. While before Poland-Lithuania ruled all this territory, today it is an equal alliance of Poland, of Darna Litova, of Belarus, and of the Ukrainian People's Republic. And the funny part is that all of these countries are of different ideologies. For example, the Republic of Poland is a bourgeois Christian nationalist state. It is ruled by Oboj Wilkej Polski. His entire ideology is a fusion of faith and patriotism. Christian nationalism, which envisions a state where religious identity is not just a personal conviction, but a defining feature of national destiny. Then we have got Darna Litua, which is. I don't even know how to describe the ideology of this madman. Vilius Storostas, Vaidunas. This man wants to rebuild an ancient paradise. He believes that ancient gods once walked the lands of Lithuania, and that their spirit still lingers in the blood of the chosen. The adherents of pagan ultranationalism reject foreign faiths and universalist doctrines. Now, the funny part, as I said, is that the Republic of Poland is literally a Christian nationalist state with right wing youth squads. At the same time, they are allied to a pagan power. In fact, many diplomats in Warsaw frequently are afraid that Lithuania may actually be working with the Deutsches Reich, whose leader Reinhard Hydrich has often said that he supports such occultist pagan beliefs, although not as much as his predecessor Himmler. But anyway, moving on, Belarus is another state which is just a military junta. Nothing can be really said about Belarus except that they build their entire identity about saying or stating how they are not part of Russia. That is all that they have. And then we have the Ukrainian People's Republic, which is a liberal democracy. Yes, really. under Alexander Shulgin and the ZDPU. Now, the Ukrainians' main goal is again to get back those territories of Ukraine that were lost in the Great Russian Civil War. And then we have the Republic of Crimea, which is neither allying with Russia nor with the intermarium. And then we have Russia itself. Out of the ashes of the Russian Civil War he arose, Admiral Kolchak. Admiral Kolchak, on, on, on the surface, he may seem to be a very nominal autocrat with no real ideology apart from opposing Bolshevism. But once you go deep, then you get to see that Admiral Kolchak does indeed have some sort of ideology. His ideology is that of developmentalism and oligarchy fused together. At the same time, he also has many policies which supports peasants, and he has granted autonomy to various communes while signing deals with oligarchs at the same time. He wants to build a Russia that is neither Russian nor Western, but somewhere in the middle. A Russia that is built on orthodox nationalism. But Kolchak is not alone in his conception of Russias, for there are other Russias. Chief among them is the Eurasian Federative Republic, but we shall get to it later on when we come to Asia. Now we move on to southern Europe. The first is the Italian National Republic under Italo Balbo, who is a fascist. You all know what is fascism. Apart from the German Reich, fascism is our second most bastardized enemy. But the funny thing is that the fascists have been largely castrated. Benito Mussolini was il duce of fascism until the shameful defeat of the Italians in the Great Balkan War, where Italy, Turkey, and Bulgaria fought against Greece, Yugoslavia, Romania, and were somewhat supported by the Entente powers. In this war, the Italians and the Bulgarians lost. While Bulgaria was subsumed and became a part of the Kingdom of Yugoslavia, Italy lost a lot of territories, chief among them being Trieste and Fiume. After this shameful defeat, Benito Mussolini committed suicide in his palace inside Rome, and he was succeeded by Italo Balbo. Italo Balbo's all the ideology, although still fascist, is more about popular fascism. He has slightly decreased the security state apparatus of Benito Mussolini and has in fact instituted many reforms which might make it seem like he is moving towards the path of some sort of compromise about democracy, but that is not really true. Italy is a still firmly fascist state. But what Balbo has done is that he has given some concessions to businessmen, some concessions to the Catholic Church, some concessions to old monarchists who lament about the days when the crown ruled Italy. Then we move on to the Kingdom of Yugoslavia, which is again a liberal kingdom which has finally brought the light of freedom to the Balkans. However, we must not be deceived. This is still a very bourgeois state that we must oppose. Then we come to the Ostfriesische Volksrepublik, which is basically the Austrian People's Republic under Alfred Klar. Although nominally our allies, these people are not real communists because they believe that, the baby must be born and it must start walking on day one. Left communism emphasizes the self organization and direct action of the working class. Unlike more mainstream communist parties, left communists reject participation in parliamentary politics. They are extreme left-wingers. They are built from theorists like Amerigo Bordiga. They want to build a stateless, classless society based on the principles of worker control on day one. And that, my friends, is impossible. And that is what has led to the complete ruination of the Austrian economy. Yes, they banned money, but they have replaced it by a system of what we can only describe as communist warlordism, where the barter system on the local level is characterized by whatever the local Communist Party officials says. As a result, the people are starving, there are famines, and all this because these people want to bring communism on day one. What they have essentially created instead is a sort of anarchist hodgepodge where communist bureaucrats and officials declare and dictate what value is there for everything in every region and what people must do, along with a security apparatus that keeps the population in check. Then we move on to the Kingdom of Romania, which is an ethno-nationalist state under Nicolae Iorga. He wants to build a state where the peasants are loyal to the king and the oligarchs stay in line, while the church is decried. No, the church is not decried. The church is praised as being the very base of Romanian nationalism. Under Nicolae Iorga, the dream of Greater Romania has been realized. For today, Romania stretches from the swamps of Bessarabia and Transnistria to southern Dobruja, and from the forests of northern Transylvania to Banat, and of course to Bucharest, the city which rules over all. However, the Bulgarian population is not happy with living in Yugoslavia, and there have been many pro Bulgar revolutions and rebellions after the conquest by Yugoslavia. The Yugoslavs consider the Bulgarians to be Slavs in denial. They believe that the Bulgar blood died out a long time ago, and that the actual proletariat and peasants of Bulgaria are nothing but South Slavs. Then we move on to the Kingdom of Hellas. Nominally ruled by King Georgios II, all real power is held by Georgios Kondilis, the dictator of Greece. Although democratic in name, he has built a system where his party, the ERK, comes to power again and again and again. And why wouldn't it? He is a Hellenic populist. For under Kondilis, Greece has achieved what Greece had not achieved for the past 2 millennia. Not since Alexander the Great had the kingdom of Hellas managed to secure its power. True, Byzantium had secured its power, but it is unknown if Byzantium can be considered a part of Greece proper. But even Byzantium fell in 1453, and since then the Turkish yoke had ruled over Constantinopolis. These are the words of Kondilis, by the way. We Marxists do not support his regime. We oppose his colonial policies. His states, like the Principality of Pontus, which is ruled by King Paulus I, are nothing but colonial principalities. Here, the Turks are treated as second-class citizens, and now we see widespread ethnic cleansing. In fact, the exodus of Turks from most of Turkey, especially Asia Minor here, was one of the largest cases of ethnic cleansing in the world, something that even Reinhard Hydrich or Alexander Kolchak have not done. This is one of the largest genocides in the history of humans. And then we have the Eparchy of Kapodica under the collaborator Fevzi Kakmak. He is an Islamic Democrat, but what a pathetic individual he is, for these people have collaborated with those that have slaughtered millions of Turks, and now they are happy with living in their small, reduced Turkey with the capital at Ankara. And they are so pathetic that they have even accepted the name of Cappadocia. Yes, they have accepted a Greek name for their Turkish land. What a shame. And then we move on to the Middle East. The Middle East is, most of them are standard conservative monarchies. The state of Palestine is the only real state which has any different ideology. It is ruled by Musa Alami. Musa Alami is an ethnic nationalist. But of course, the state of Israel had fought the state of Palestine in the 1940s, in the early 1940s. And after the complete destruction of the Jewish state, the Palestinians turned to ethnic nationalism. The less I say, the better in this case. Then we come to the Republic of Turkestan, which is ruled by the Turkestan Ozdilik Harakati Yosh Turkestan, which is another populist state that wants a pan-tyrannist republic in Turkestan. In fact, They completely oppose the government of Fevzi Kakmak Pasha and have supported the establishment of a Turkish government in exile in Samarkand. And then we come to Asia. Asia today exists in a weird sort of equilibrium between Japan on one hand, Russia on one hand, and China on the other. And it is only this equilibrium that prevents any sort of all out war. The first is the imperial power of Japan. The Japanese Empire, although great in name, is completely hamstrung. They cannot expand. Their military wants wars of annihilation against the Chinese and the Russians. But any such war will lead Japan into a two front war against Russia, China, and America. And that is the only thing stopping Japan from launching these wars. I recently met a friend from the state of Manchuria. He has stated that the Japanese may soon crown Puyi as the emperor of Manchuria, and Hideki Tojo will become his prime minister instead of being the governor general of Manchuria. And then they might use that justification to launch a war against China any moment now. But just like Central and Eastern Europe, such a war has been in the coming for 5 years, but it has never really occurred yet. Then we have the Eurasian Federative Republic. The Eurasian story is very inspiring. They went from being a small warlord state centered around Harbin and of the cities of Khinjar and Khulunbuir to reunifying the entire Manchuria under their vision of a Eurasian state, a state that is neither wholly Western nor entirely Eastern. Eurasianism envisions a grand civilization that bridges continents and cultures, drawing strength from its unique geopolitical position. It rejects the influence of liberal democracy and Marxist internationalism, and it seeks to forge a powerful centralized state that upholds the traditions of its diverse peoples while resisting external domination. It rejects ideologies and wants to build a civilizational state where Muslims, Christians, and everyone can live in harmony, where there will be no kings, no communist chairmen, only Eurasia, as it had existed in the past and as it shall exist in the future. In the beginning, they were a small warlord state, and the Japanese couldn't intervene in their war against the fascists of the Russian fascist state because any such war would have drawn the ire of the Entente state of Russia, which has existed in Vladivostok. But after defeating the fascists, the Eurasians launched a war against the Entente Puppet Republic of Russia. And then Alexander Kolchak supported the Eurasians because a victory for the Entente Republic of Russia would have meant a victory for a rival Russian government that would oppose him. And taking the help of Kolchak, the Eurasians reunified Manchuria, and now Kolchak has realized his folly because the Eurasians now lay claim to the entire Russia, and only time will tell what shall transpire next in Eurasia. Then we come to China, where Mao Zedong and his version of communism has defeated Chiang Kai shek. Although we do stand with Mao Zedong in geopolitics and in his opposition to Japanese imperialism over what are parts of China, we do oppose his vision of a state of peasants because the peasants are petty bourgeois. They cannot be leaders of a people's revolution. Mao Zedong is a revisionist, and though our support to him is purely military, we do not support him in an ideological sense. Then we move on to India. First of all, we have the Kingdom of Afghanistan, then the state of Khalistan, which is a Sikh ethnic state, then Sindh, which is a non-ethnic republic, and then we have the Republic of India, which was reunified by Sikandar Hayat Khan and the Unionist Conservative Party. The Unionist Party was born in the aftermath of the destruction of the Indian National Congress, when it split into left fronts, right fronts, and center fronts. Most of the centrists joined Sikandar Hayat Khan. These centrists were basically conservative Democrats who wanted an India which is a direct continuation of the British Raj, where no change in the caste system and no change in its old systems shall hold. And for now, this centrist vision of India has won out. It opposes Mao Zedong's revolutionary call for arms in China, although there are rumors that certain radicals like Subhash Chandra Bose and M.N. Roy are collaborating with the Maoists to launch a Maoist revolution from Calcutta. It is unknown if they shall succeed. Then we have the Kingdom of Mysore, which is staunchly allied to the British emergency government under Freeman Thomas. These two are the remnants of British imperialism in India, one a more direct colony, and the other being a collaborative state under the Vodiyar dynasty. The Vodiyar dynasty opposes republicanism in India. It wants an India as it had existed in the old times, when the British ruled it, or perhaps even before, when the Mughals ruled it. Together with Salazar and the French colonies, these four form a powerful bloc in southern India. Recently, the British have began to support Dravidianist movements in southern India, just so they can oppose the Republic of India. But the British do not know that these Dravidian nationalist movements might be their own death, because the King of Mysore is increasingly courting more and more Dravidianist ideologues in his court. Recently, his prime ministers are starting to be Dravidianists, and they wish to crown him as king of Dravida Nadu. And if this happens, then the British rule in southern India might collapse. And then, this is very funny, but if this happens, then potentially the Kingdom of Mysore might find itself vulnerable to attacks by the Republic of India. Only time will tell what shall happen in India. Then we have Southeast Asia, which is ruled by various states which are part of the comprador bourgeois, which either collaborate with European imperialism or Japanese imperialism. There is nothing really to say about them. Then we have the colonial governments of the Dutch, and then we have the British colonies of Australia and New Zealand. Finally, we come to the Americas. The United States of America today is ruled by a populist, Huey Long. We, as Bukharinists, believe that this shall be the death knell for world capitalism, because Huey Long's increasingly erratic and populist policies go completely against what made America powerful in the first place. Huey Long has built various political machines all over America to ensure that he shall keep winning elections over and over again. He has won the election of 1936, he has won the election of 1940, he has won the election of 1944, and now the man aims to stand for elections for a fourth time. This is unbelievable. But this is the story of his widespread corruption. But contrary to popular beliefs, it's not only corruption. Some people in America, in fact, a lot of them genuinely love him because he has launched a lot of populist policies which benefit the peasants and sometimes even the workers. But we as communists should always stay firm that these policies are merely made to stave off and prolong the quest of time, that the revolution shall be inevitable. After that, we have got the Latin American countries. Some of them are military dictatorships, some of them are literally fascists. Chief among them is the regime of Maximiliano Hernandez Martinez, who opposes both American imperialism and communism. He wants a state of Hispanic mysticism, a return to the old, when the caudillos ruled New Spain, when the conquistadores invaded and subjugated natives. This is the kind of state that Hernandez wants to build. And he also wants to unify Central America under his rule. He is obviously opposed by the slightly more liberal republics of Nicaragua and Costa Rica. Then we have Brazil, which, just like Huey Long's America, remains under a political machine of Getulio Vargas. Vargas is again a very complicated figure with a very complicated yet very simple ideology. On one hand, he is just a standard bourgeois populist. On the other hand, his ideology combines weird forms of conservatism with a slightly socialist allying system. Recently, Vargas has shown signs of retirement in a few years, and now his own movement has split into left wing Vargoists and right wing Vargoists. Then we have The Socialist Republic of Chile. Just like Mao Zedong's China, we offer military support for the Socialist Republic of Chile should it be harmed by its neighbors, but no ideological support, because in the end, these people are social democratic deviationists. But their main enemy is the social state of Peru. There is nothing social about them. They are fascists under the Union Revolucionaria Party. They are allying with the Germans and the Italians. And then we come to Africa. Most of Africa today remains under colonization, be it the comprador bourgeois of Morocco or the actual colonial structures of Britain, Italy, France, Anglo Egyptian Sudan, Belgium, Portugal. And then we have got Malawi, the Kingdom of Malawi, which is a strange state under John Chilembwe. John Chilembwe bravely fought a brutal guerrilla war from 1943 against the British, and even after 2 years, the British have been unable to defeat him. Recently, there has been a ceasefire, and once again, we do not defend his Marawi African Congress and his autocratic personalist rule, but we do support his anti colonial zeal. For he has lit a match which shall soon alight itself across the entire Africa, and everything shall be liberated, down from the Cape to the Congo to Cairo. And that, my friends, is the state of the world today. A state divided between the Entente, the Balkan Pact, the intermarium, and a world where war can come at any movement, any moment. Be safe, my friends. I hope such a war never comes. But sometimes I believe that to free the world proletariat, may it come.